If you've ever sat in a trainer and felt the airplane fighting you instead of helping you, this story will make sense fast. Piper built the Tomahawk to beat the Cessna 150, but in doing so, they forgot one rule of training aircraft. Beginners need forgiveness, not personality. Let's find out in detail. On paper, the Piper PA-38 Tomahawk looked like exactly what Piper needed. Cessna's 150 had dominated the training market for years, and Piper wanted a clean sheet answer instead of another warmed-over legacy design. The brief was simple: a modern, affordable two-seat trainer that flight schools could buy in numbers and students could learn in without immediately outgrowing it. From a business point of view, that makes total sense. Piper didn't want to copy the 150 outright. They wanted something that felt newer, sharper, and more real airplane than the slow, forgiving Cessna everyone already knew. And this is where the Tomahawk's problems quietly begin. Personally, I don't think Piper set out to build a bad trainer. I think they overestimated what student pilots actually need. A trainer isn't supposed to be interesting. It isn't supposed to feel sporty. It's supposed to be predictable, boring, and forgiving to the point of being almost dull. The Tomahawk wasn't dull. It had lighter, more responsive controls. It felt more alive in pitch. It gave quicker feedback to pilot inputs. If you were an experienced pilot hopping into one, you could easily think, this is nicer to fly than a 150. But if you're a student on your 5th or 6th hour, that responsiveness doesn't feel nice. It feels like pressure. It feels like the airplane is always one mistake away from biting you. And that's the key misunderstanding. Piper designed a trainer that assumed students wanted engagement. Cessna had already learned that students want reassurance. On paper, the Tomahawk ticked all the boxes. In the cockpit, it sent the wrong message from the very first lesson. And once a trainer makes students uneasy early on, everything that follows becomes an uphill battle. To understand why the Tomahawk exists at all, you have to look at who Piper was really aiming at. This airplane wasn't designed around student comfort first. It was designed around market share. By the late 1970s, the Cessna 150 had become the default trainer. It was everywhere, and more importantly, flight schools trusted it. Piper didn't want to just match that. They wanted to leapfrog it. The thinking was straightforward. If they could build a trainer that felt more modern and more capable, schools would see it as an upgrade rather than a compromise. The Tomahawk was supposed to feel like a real airplane from day one, not something students tolerated until they moved on. From Piper's point of view, that sounded smart. Why teach someone in something slow and mushy if you could give them sharper handling and better feedback early? The problem is that training isn't about feedback, it's about margin. The Cessna 150 succeeds because it quietly protects students from themselves. You can be late on the rudder, sloppy with pitch, or slow on recovery, and the airplane absorbs a lot of that without drama. The Tomahawk didn't absorb much. By trying to make the airplane more engaging, Piper reduced the buffer that makes a trainer effective. The controls were lighter. Pitch changes happened quicker. Mistakes showed up immediately instead of being softened. If you're an instructor, that means more intervention. If you're a student, it means more stress. And in a training environment, stress slows learning. Piper wasn't wrong to challenge Cessna, but they challenged the wrong thing. They tried to improve the flying experience instead of protecting it. And once you do that, you stop building a trainer and start building a small airplane that happens to be used for training. Quick pause here. If you're enjoying this kind of real-world breakdown, hit subscribe and drop a comment with what you would train in. Cessna 150, 152, Tomahawk, or something else. The most controversial design decision on the Tomahawk was also the most visible one, the T-tail. Piper didn't choose it by accident. On paper, a T-tail keeps the horizontal stabilizer in cleaner airflow during cruise, which can improve efficiency and pitch authority. That sounds great until you remember what a trainer actually does all day. Trainers live at low speeds, high angles of attack, and right on the edge of stalls. And that's where the Tomahawk's T-tail became a problem. At high angles of attack, The wing can disturb the airflow going to the tail. When that happens, pitch effectiveness becomes less predictable. In the Tomahawk, this showed up most clearly during slow flight and stall training, exactly where students spend a lot of time. Instead of giving clear, progressive feedback as you approach the stall, the airplane could feel vague one moment and then suddenly decisive the next. For an experienced pilot, that's manageable. You know what's coming. For a student, it feels like the airplane isn't communicating clearly, and trainers need to communicate. The T-tail also contributed to weaker natural stall warnings. The pitch field didn't always degrade gradually. That meant students didn't get the long, gentle build-up that helps them recognize and correct mistakes early. Personally, I think this is where Piper misread the role completely. A trainer shouldn't teach lessons through surprise. It should telegraph them clearly and early. The Tomahawk's T-tail wasn't unsafe by design, but it was poorly suited to the slow, repetitive, mistake-filled world of primary training. And once an airplane feels unpredictable near the stall, everything else about it becomes harder to trust. The Tomahawk didn't earn its reputation because it stalled earlier than other trainers. It earned it because of how it stalled. In a good training airplane, the stall is an event you feel coming. The controls soften, the airplane starts to buffet, and there's time for the student to process what's happening. The Tomahawk often skipped part of that conversation. As you slowed it down, everything could feel relatively normal right up until the moment it wasn't. When the stall arrived, it could be abrupt, and in some cases it came with a noticeable wing drop. For a student already nervous about stall training, that moment was unforgettable, and not in a good way. If you've ever sat in the right seat watching a student during early stall training, you know how tense those minutes are. The Tomahawk didn't calm that tension. It amplified it. Instead of building confidence, it reinforced fear. I've talked to pilots who trained in Tomahawks decades ago and still remember their first stall lesson vividly. That's telling. A trainer should teach and then fade into the background. The Tomahawk stayed front and center. Instructors could manage it. They knew how to anticipate the break and correct it quickly. But that meant more hands-on control from the right seat and more instructor workload during lessons that are supposed to be basic. And once students start fearing a specific maneuver, learning slows down across the board. Confidence drops. Progress stalls. The airplane becomes an obstacle instead of a tool. That's the opposite of what a primary trainer is supposed to be. Here's the part that often gets lost when people talk about the Tomahawk. It wasn't a bad airplane in absolute terms. In fact, if you flew it with confidence and good technique, it behaved just fine. Experienced pilots didn't panic in it. Some even enjoyed it. The controls were responsive, the airplane was honest about what it was doing, and if you stayed ahead of it, nothing about the Tomahawk was mysterious. That's why you'll occasionally hear pilots say, the bad reputation is overblown. But that misses the point. A primary trainer isn't meant to reward good flying. It's meant to protect bad flying while it's being corrected. And that's where the Tomahawk fundamentally missed its mission. Students don't arrive with refined control inputs, good energy management, or calm reactions near the stall. They arrive tense, overloaded, and late on corrections. A good trainer absorbs that. The Tomahawk exposed it. Instead of smoothing out sloppy pitch control, it reacted immediately. Instead of easing into mistakes, it highlighted them. That might sound educational, but in practice it raises stress levels and increases instructor intervention. For instructors, that meant more work, more hands-on flying, more talking students down instead of letting the airplane do some of that work for them. Over time, that gets tiring. And once instructors dislike teaching in an airplane, flight schools notice. Utilization drops, preference shifts, the airplane gets scheduled less. The Tomahawk ended up in a strange middle ground, too demanding to be loved by students, and not rewarding enough to justify itself as anything other than a trainer. That's a bad place to live in aviation. Once the Tomahawk picked up a reputation, it never really shook it. And in the training world, reputation spreads faster than facts. Students talk, instructors talk more, and flight schools listen very carefully to both. Stories started circulating about abrupt stalls, nervous first solos, and instructors who preferred literally anything else in the fleet. Whether every story was fair didn't matter. Enough of them lined up with real experiences to form a pattern. And here's the key problem. Training aircraft don't get judged in isolation. They get compared daily, often on the same ramp. When one airplane consistently makes lessons smoother and another consistently raises workload, the decision becomes obvious. Instructors disliked the Tomahawk because it demanded constant management. Students disliked it because it didn't inspire confidence. That combination is lethal in a market built on repetition and volume. Flight schools want airplanes that reduce stress, not amplify it. They want students to progress faster, not slower. And they want instructors who can focus on teaching rather than babysitting the aircraft. The Tomahawk quietly failed those tests. It wasn't unsafe when flown correctly, but it required correctness too early in the learning curve, and that meant more go-arounds, more interventions, and more strained lessons. Once schools realized that students progressed more smoothly in more forgiving trainers, the Tomahawk started losing favor. It didn't get pulled overnight. It just stopped being ordered again. And that's how most training aircraft fail. Not with headlines, but with silence. When you strip the Tomahawk story down to its core, the failure isn't about a single design flaw. It's about a misunderstanding of what a primary trainer is supposed to do. A trainer isn't there to sharpen pilots. It's there to carry them safely through their worst flying. The Tomahawk behaved more like a small sport aircraft that happened to be used for instruction, rather than an airplane designed to shield beginners while they learn. The T-tail, the abrupt stall behavior, and the lack of low-speed forgiveness all pointed in the same direction. This airplane expected students to be ahead of it earlier than most students realistically are. That expectation might make sense in advanced training. It does not make sense in hour 5 of a private pilot course. Personally, I think Piper designed the Tomahawk as if the student pilot of the future would be calmer, more disciplined, and more mechanically precise than the student pilot that actually shows up. That's not a criticism of students. It's just reality. Learning to fly is overwhelming, and good trainers quietly compensate for that. Cessna understood this better. The 150 wasn't inspiring, but it was predictable. It didn't scare people. It let students build confidence before demanding precision. The Tomahawk reversed that order, and once that mismatch became clear, the market responded exactly as you'd expect. Schools moved away from it. Instructors avoided it. Students dreaded it. The Tomahawk didn't collapse because it was dangerous. It faded because it defeated the very purpose of a trainer. And in aviation, building the wrong airplane for the job is often worse than building a bad one. Now you know, the Tomahawk proves that good intentions don't guarantee a good trainer. If you enjoyed this honest breakdown of aviation designs that missed their mission, like the video, subscribe, and comment below. Would you rather learn in something forgiving or something that forces you to get it right fast?